Kawasaki Heavy Industries. You definitely know the name. For over a century, it's been an absolute titan of Japanese industry. But what happens when a giant like that, built on tradition, is forced to completely reinvent itself to survive? Well, that's exactly what we're breaking down today. One of the most ambitious corporate turnarounds happening anywhere in the world right now. Let's dive in.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the crisis that started it all. Then we'll get into their bold new vision for the future, see how they're actually executing that pivot, check in on the latest progress report, and finally we'll wrap up with the key things you need to know.
All right, so let's set the stage. You know, every big comeback story has that one moment, that wake-up call when you realize the old way just isn't going to cut it anymore. And for Kawasaki, their moment was a big one. And to really get why what happened next was such a shock, you have to appreciate just how massive Kawasaki is. I mean, for over 125 years, these guys have been building the modern world. We're talking about the Shinkansen bullet trains, gigantic cargo ships, and yeah, of course, those legendary ninja motorcycles. They were the very definition of a rock-solid industrial giant. And then, this happened. In the fiscal year ending in March of 2021, the giant stumbled hard. They posted a shocking net loss of over 19 billion yen. Now, to put that in perspective, the year before they'd made almost 19 billion in profit. That is a massive 38 billion yen swing. The pandemic, of course, absolutely hammered their aerospace division, but what it really did was expose some deep, underlying vulnerabilities in their whole business model.
So when you get hit with a crisis like that, you can't just tinker around the edges. You need a big, bold response. And Kawasaki's answer wasn't some small adjustment. It was a radical plan to reinvent the entire company, something they called Group Vision 2030.
And what's really fascinating here is the shift in their thinking. They decided, okay, we're not just a company that builds stuff anymore. Instead, they refocused on solving huge, future social problems. They zeroed in on 3 core areas, leveraging their incredible robotics expertise for things like remote work and healthcare, developing next-gen mobility like autonomous vehicles and cargo drones, and the big one, leading the charge on clean energy.
Now, robotics and mobility are huge, don't get me wrong, but the real heart of this transformation, the thing they are betting the entire company on, is hydrogen. And I mean they are going all in. They aren't just dabbling. Their goal is to build the entire global supply chain for it, from start to finish.
And they laid out a really clear roadmap to get there. The first phase was all about proving the technology could actually work, and they nailed that back in 2022 by pulling off the world's very first maritime transport of liquefied hydrogen. Pretty incredible. So now they're in phase 2, scaling everything up and getting it ready for full commercialization by 2030.
But look, for a hydrogen society to become a reality, it all comes down to one thing. Price. It has to be cheap. And Kawasaki's magic number is 30 yen per cubic meter. If they can hit that cost target by 2030, hydrogen suddenly becomes competitive with gasoline. And that, well, that changes everything. So what's the potential payoff here? We're talking a projected 300 billion yen in annual revenue, just from their hydrogen business, by 2030. And, get this, as a sign of just how confident they're feeling, they've already revised that forecast up.
Okay, so a grand vision on paper is one thing, but how do you actually make it happen in the real world? Between 2021 and 2024, Kawasaki got to work fundamentally rewiring the company. Their first move was a big one, maybe even a bit of a shocker. They decided to break up the old conglomerate. In October 2021, they spun off their iconic motorcycle business and their railcar division into completely separate, independent companies. The strategy here was pretty smart. Let these established, successful units become more agile and run on their own, while allowing the parent company to pour all its focus and resources into pioneering these new technologies. And financially, this move was a stroke of genius. That newly independent power sports and engine business just took off, becoming a massive profit engine. In fact, by fiscal year 2023, it was responsible for the vast majority of the entire group's profit. It effectively became the cash cow that's funding all of these long-term, super expensive bets on hydrogen and robotics.
And pretty soon, the results started to show across the board. Their Hinotori surgical robot is now being used in dozens of facilities across Japan. Their cargo drone hit a major payload milestone. They proved the hydrogen transport concept works, and crucially, they got back to being profitable just 1 year after that massive loss and have stayed there ever since. You could see the strategy was delivering real, tangible results.
But, and you knew there was a but coming,
A transformation of this scale is never a simple, straight line up. The latest results we have from the first quarter of their new fiscal year give us a really important reality check.
So let's just look at the numbers. On the surface, things look pretty good. Revenue is up. Business profit from their core operations is also up. But then you get to the bottom line, net profit. And whoa, it dropped sharply, from over 15 billion yen a year ago to just over 4 billion this quarter. So what's going on here?
Well, the key thing to understand is that this isn't a sign of failure. It's actually a direct reflection of the cost of their ambition. They are pouring huge amounts of cash into R&D for things like hydrogen. These are massive, capital-intensive projects that just don't pay off overnight. This is the financial reality of turning a 125-year-old ship in a totally new direction.
On top of that, the path isn't perfectly smooth internally either. Kawasaki is also dealing with some ongoing special investigations into compliance issues in a couple of their other businesses. It's a significant governance challenge that the company is actively working to resolve as part of all these other reforms.
So, after a huge crisis, a bold new vision, and several years of intense, difficult execution, where does that leave Kawasaki today? Let's try to distill this whole complex journey into a few key takeaways.
First, this is a fundamental strategic pivot. KHI is shifting from being just a traditional manufacturer to a solutions provider in these future-focused fields. Second, their future is deeply tied to their massive bet on hydrogen. So much is riding on them succeeding there. Third, that structural reform was absolutely critical. Spinning off those divisions created the focus and, more importantly, the funding for these long-term plays. And finally, this is still very much a work in progress. As the latest financials show, the path isn't linear, and this kind of transformation is incredibly expensive.
Which leaves us with the big final question. Kawasaki is betting its entire 125-year legacy on hydrogen and robotics being the future. We've seen the plan, we've seen the execution, and we've seen the costs. Will this massive pivot actually work? Will it be enough to redefine this industrial giant for the next 100 years? Only time is going to tell.